This all is just a ruse. Like, he's like, I'm going to kidnap her. I'm going to force her into this contract. And then the only way I'll get her out of the contract is if I get what I want, which is the title shot. And then perhaps the most disgusting moment of the show, he says, the road to Armageddon continues. Welcome to Tales from the Attitude Era. It's Rob Pasbani with my co-host, the former head writer of WWE from 1999 to 2001, Tommy Blacha. Welcome, Tommy. How you feeling?
Yay. I need what is my podcasting entrance? I have to work on it. Oh no, that's Batista. Fuck. I'll work on it.
You'll figure it out.
Yeah, I'll figure it out. Good. How are you doing? The road to Armageddon.
I'm doing great. I'm really enjoying this moment in the time capsule in our review, because it's a story I vividly remember, but all the little moments I don't remember. So It's fun to revisit it.
Yeah, likewise. These
shows have been very, very easy to watch.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really looking forward to Armageddon. I really want to see this turn. Spoiler alert.
Yeah.
25-year-old spoiler alert. But it's been going well.
Yeah. Even the shows that are sometimes, like leading up to a pay-per-view, which sometimes is like a little bit, well, they're a little easy because you generally like know what's happening at the pay-per-view. So it's like, oh, you can just follow some sort of logic. But this, I remember specifically, I'm going to say people were burned out, but the wedding thing was so big, and it was kind of like you really started to realize like, oh, it's relentless. There's no break. You know what I mean? Because you're kind of like, okay, leading up. Oh, there's the wedding angle, and oh, what does that mean? And oh, pay-per-view soon. I really, in my mindset, being there for a while, realized like, oh, this is the life. You know what I mean? Like this really, like even when I contemplating leaving, it was like, oh, there's no life outside of this. I understand like, oh, this is why people are third generation wrestlers and such. This isn't like punch in, punch out. Like this is relentless,
Yeah. Like in these last 2 or 3 months that you've been working at WWF, did you have any time to like go out at night or see your friends or anything like that?
Well, we had like the schedule was kind of okay because I would go back to New York. I lived in New York. So we'd have like a travel day, usually like Tuesday. And then I would certainly, and it was pretty pleasurable, but I wouldn't, I wouldn't go out and drink a lot because there was always like, impending doom of like, okay, got to go to Stanford tomorrow. Okay, what are we doing? You know what I mean? Because the more you didn't, tried to wing it, just the more fucked up it would be. And like the stuff in just talking out every angle or getting with good words. Okay, where are we at with everything? Just tracking everything and being ready for potential stuff was pretty intense. And then, always being like, oh, I got to go in and wait around and Thursday and go to Stanford. And that was like an hour away. So I always had that impending doom, yet at the same time, it was pretty fun. I had a routine where I used to go to the library in New York, which was funny, the beautiful library on Fifth Avenue with my laptop and write wrestling, always like Tuesday and Wednesday. So I was kind of like, to me, that was always just hilarious because that place is like a cathedral, it's just like this beautiful, huge library and everyone's like, shit. So, and I'm there like, I'm writing wrestling in here. So
and then the Godfather brings out his hose.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that was always, so I had a really like wonderful routine, but there always was, living in Manhattan, travel, and it just always was, I don't want to say uneasy. It just was like, it was
anxious.
Hanging over you. Yeah. There was not a lot of like, it was similar to working at Conan, but Conan was like, oh, you're always in Manhattan. And there just was like a lot less kind of
And you would
pressure.
get weeks off, right? Like,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That was something to realize here. There's no weeks off. There's,
right.
You know what I mean?
Like, did you even get like the Christmas week off? Christmas and New Year's?
No, there's no, yeah.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Now
ever,
they do, but
yeah.
Or, the holidays, but the week of, they always book house shows, but the holidays themselves to get off.
Yeah, at this Attitude Era that was just ramping up. Are you kidding? Also, like,
they're
right when you're
money. Yeah.
making money, but also like they had added SmackDown, so you got to realize you're still putting that into your workflow. You know what I mean? SmackDown wasn't that old, So for all apparatus going like, holy shit. And then there's once a month pay-per-view. Everything is locked. And then what does the madman do? I'm starting a pro football league. You used to start thinking about stuff for the XFL. Like, what? You know what I mean? In fact, there was times that people were booked. I remember Gewurz, like, I can't be in San Francisco for the football game at 5 p.m. on Saturday, and then in New York Sunday morning. Just it's physically impossible, like shit like that. It was like,
right.
So yeah, it was just relentless, absolutely relentless, and that's why you realize poor fucking wrestlers lose their minds and like eat a bunch of somas because it's like, oh shit, my fucking back's fucked up, and 3 weeks off TV, you know, whoa. There goes my earning. There goes everything. So grin and bear it, tape it up. You know, that's where a lot of that comes from. Because also,
one thing I'm noticing is like you have these puzzle pieces and just every week it's like, okay, how am I arranging them to make the final puzzle? Because it's like the talent pool seems to be virtually the same on all of the shows. It's just who's facing whom is a little different.
Yeah, you're exactly right.
So like to your point about the wrestlers, it's like you want to be one of those puzzle pieces. You don't want to be one of those puzzle pieces that they only use on Heat and Jacked.
Yeah.
You want to be in these main programs. You want to be thrown into this main show.
Absolutely. And it's a very chaotic situation because it never follows a lot of logic. So you're always ready for a lot of your puzzle pieces, but then there's always the last thing is like, okay, well, what will Vince go for? And that usually didn't follow logic. You know, sometimes like I always did the impersonation of him where you'd, hey, how about this match? And his glasses would come off and I would be like, imagine like freeze frame and an interior dialogue like in a movie. At that point, I didn't know what was going to happen because he'd either be like, come on, get serious. And you're like, or yeah, we got to do that. You know, sometimes you wouldn't know and just be like, oh boy. So you just had to be ready for like a bunch of shit all the time. How about this? How about that? How about this? How about that? And just like writing for a showrunner on a sitcom or something, sometimes you do this. Hey, how about this versus this with this? That's bullshit. Okay. Everyone's talking for 40 minutes. Same idea, but told like this. Oh, how about this? There we go. A lot of that. And that's something that happens, I imagine, in TV and politics and corporate world. Like, just tell the same idea spread out over 30 minutes with a different inflection. Just give that aha inflection.
Yeah, after everything else has been ruled out. Oh,
exactly.
This is the first thing ruled out.
Yeah, so a lot of that makes for fun times.
So it's December 6th, 1999. It's the Monday before the pay-per-view, the Go Home Raw.
And do you know what else is happening in this era? Is the fucking Y2K madness.
Yes, I mean, right.
Was all the time. And, you know.
Yeah, everyone was worried that all the systems were going to crash in a month. And that was funny because most people kind of ignored it, like whatever, you know, it was kind of like, you know, it was a good news story, like, well, you know, but the patina or the osmosis of it was everywhere, you know, and on the news, like, well, will the computers stop or not, you know, and all that shit. And so, and I do remember someone I won't name, like kind of a wacky conspiracy theorist employee of WWF at the time was like, hoarding water and stuff. And I remember teasing him going like, you're really getting to the point where you think, what is drinking water going to do? You know, like everything's going to fail. And I'm like, and I would ask, do you have a gun? I would get a gun first if I really felt like I need to hoard water. You know, it's that weird phenomenon of like, I don't know. They're just like, I got to do something. It's like, water, like toilet paper.
I'd always tease him. I was like, I'm going to get a gun, and then if it goes crazy where I need water, I'm going to come steal the water from you. So I'm going to point a gun at you. So you hoard the water, and I'll know that you have water. You know, if it's like, man, if it gets that bad, where we'll see. But anyways, just to flavor it up. Remember, Y2K was out there.
So we're at Worcester, Mass, at what was then known as the Worcester Centrum Center, now the DCU Center. I love Worcester as the town. Right across the street from the DCU Center is the Palladium, where I would go many years for the New England Metal and Hardcore Festival. So that's how I know that area. I know that parking lot very well.
Yeah. Apropos Worcester, metal, extreme metal wrestling. I get to say this because I'm from Detroit. Worcester, what a fucked up town.
Someone had to say it. I didn't want to say it. I didn't want to be rude to our Massachusetts Western heritage or Eastern heritage, I guess, in this sense, listeners.
And I'll bring up some more because I remember later in this episode, we visit this woman who is the Big Show's mother with the Big Boss Man, and she was a Worcester resident. How we hooked up with her. So this show I was absent for a lot because I went out into the streets of Worcester with the Big Boss Man to do this pre-tape, and then there's traffic, and we got back. So it was one of those shows where we pre-wrote it, and I wasn't there for most of the show, but I got a little tour of Worcester, including this supermark that was this woman's son who told me all about Worcester, and he was kind of like I would say he was an oddball, and he would tell me, Worcester's not even supposed to exist. And he said, that's because the textile mills, all the people came, but they closed, and all the chemicals are in the water. That's why everyone's nuts. That was him saying, it was like, he got me this tour of Worcester, saying it was a interesting town, but let's get into it. We'll bring that up later, the Big Boss Man segment.
All right. So first out are the New Age Outlaws. Road Dogg's opening monologue, a little sanitized this week, as we've been talking, as WWE's trying to clean up its act with the Parent Television Council and following. So he doesn't say shiznit. He says poo-poo instead. And there was this point where he's supposed to say up in this biatch. And he says up in this, and then points the mic to the crowd, and the crowd says biatch.
Right.
And he even comments how he didn't say it. Like he's talking to the Parent Television Council. They'll excuse it.
Well, which I liked, because it's he's making fun of the situation, and then only the Western Heritage smart marks would really know what was going on in retrospect too. But at the same time, it became a thing sometimes standards and practices in this stuff, it gets so silly. It gets down to these little things. So if you just do these little odd things okay, well, they said that. And in a live show, you can always the audience is allowed to say anything because it's a live broadcast. It's these weird FCC isms, which they're not even laws, it's just these weird, FCC things that you don't want to go against, and they can fine you. It's all very strange and murky and very, very vague. But so, that was the point. Okay, sanitize, sure. But, at the same time, it wasn't really that much different. Yeah. Well, I want to actually, to your point, I want to read how the Observer covered it, because he actually says exactly what you did. Oh, good. Yeah. He says, after a week of bad publicity, which sent sponsors, and this is, by the way, in the December 12th, 99 issue of the Wrestling Observer. After a week of bad publicity, which sent sponsors running and sent its stock plummeting, the kinder, gentler WWF came back with a toned down SmackDown and a slightly toned down, although you'd have to examine closely to notice, Raw show. Right. And then he goes, the only sponsor that has returned at this point after the toned down SmackDown was Burger King. Nobody really expected sponsors to come back for a few weeks. L. Brent Bozell, whose writings on behalf of the Parent Television Council led to numerous sponsorship droppings on SmackDown, a few of which remained buying the rest of the cable package and a few which pulled out entirely. So I guess some sponsors just didn't do SmackDown to avoid Bozell, and some just pulled out. Right. And then he continues to say that on SmackDown, there were far less women in skimpy outfits, less questionable language, and generally speaking, it was as entertaining, if not more, than it usually has been, which we actually talked about on the last episode and how it was super toned down, but still great. Yeah. And now he gets to what you were just saying. There were changes promised with Raw as well. According to WWF sources, eventually the two products will be similar, and eventually Raw may carry a PG rating with the feeling it's better to be safe than go through this publicity again. However, many of the TV world noted Jerry Springer, who used Shock TV to get ahead in the talk show game, like WWE in the wrestling game. And when he toned down, his ratings toned down. And when the bad publicity faded and the media moved on to new subjects, he went right back to the successful product that made him, until the bad publicity forced him to tone down again, which I'm assuming, which actually I don't think you guys did. It actually went way more PG after you left.
So here's where he says, there were a few minor changes that few would notice. The sign guy character was said to have been given a much bigger role in storylines meant to portray and mock L. Brent Bozell III, was dropped without mention. Yeah, he hasn't even been on the show these last 2 episodes. The women were dressed sexy, but not quite as skimpy as before. But you have to look really hard to actually notice slightly more clothes on Terry, Tori, Ivory, and the hose.
Right.
And then he notes that during the Triple H promo, which we're going to get to, there were several bleeps, but it would almost seem as it was parody, as Helmsley kept using the word slut and whore, and the beeps were followed the terms being mentioned as opposed to as they were being mentioned. He notes that there's still the clothes being ripped apart match on the Armageddon pay-per-view, even though the standards for pay-per-view should be different than TV.
Right.
And then there's a quote from Bozell. Mr. McMahon's characterization of his wrestling shows is more fictitious than the shows himself. There's no rape, robbery, murder, or any attempt of those things in anything we do. We're fun, he says in a recent article. In fact, on SmackDown, there have been either portrayals or allusions to rape, bestiality, incest, homosexuality, nudity, and prostitution. The show's sexual elements are mixed liberally with extreme brutality. Characters routinely use weapons such as sledgehammers, pipes, chains, and occasionally vehicles on each other. Matches have involved men trying to light one another on fire and women pulling each other's tops off.
You know what's funny is I remember that being around and reading that and joking. I think even with Vince, we're just like, wow, we were just all joking. I was making the joke like, we got to hire him he's the best promo writer, so it was like, yeah, that's great. Because it's like, it is like the old adage, like, what does a kid say? Like, fucking L. Brent Bozell's list and be like, I got to see that. It's like amazing. It's like, wow, that guy's like, so yeah, I remember that. God, I remember that. Yeah. What a beautiful, succinct. Can we just have L. Brent Bozell write our bits for radio or like the promo on Howard Stern show or something involving vehicles and lighting?
This Monday, you'll see bestiality, incest, homosexuality, nudity, prostitution, weapons, and occasionally vehicles.
It's incredible. Yeah. Oh, he's a good writer. He's a good promo writer. Good copy. All right. Good ad man. Yeah.
Well, let's get to the matches. We kick off with New Age Outlaws versus Too Cool with Rikishi Fatu, and Fat is spelled Phatu, Fatu, which I thought was, try that out for a few weeks. And I like that the match started out with badass Billy Gunn investigating the ass of Rikishi and comparing asses. And he's like, oh, I don't know, mine's better. Right. He said he intimates that Rikishi's ass is too big. And as he's getting a little comfortable with it, Rikishi, it has this like tough look demeanor on it and kicks him. Beautiful savate kick to knock down Billy Gunn into position for the Worm, which is now called the Worm. Mm-hmm. It's now titled by Jim Ross. Jim Ross calls it out. Crowd pops for it. And interesting. I feel like this match is the perfect representation, the perfect encapsulation of the current WWF style in this moment. A lot of flash, a lot of hot dog into the crowd, and just a lot of just keeping the crowd engaged as opposed to, chain wrestling or working on heat necessarily.
No. And part of it is, the big part of it is it's like anyone, like old school wrestler would say, it's working the crowd. And the reason it evolved or whatever, mutated into that is the crowds were nuts. The whole
crowd was so nuts this episode. They went for everything.
Yeah, it wasn't like a style in the sense like, it's always give and take, like a style that was like, you work to the crowd and you do this. Like, not really. You do it when the crowd's that fucking hot. You know what I mean? The crowds were so hot for all this shit, the Worm, and they have these moments where they just cross arms and like look up and the place would go so bonkers. So it really kind of like, because you might think if you were just working like the hot crowd wasn't a part of it, someone might be like, really, I'm going to do this and then sell for that. They might have problems, but the crowds were so bonkers. They'd be like, yeah, of course, let's go with it. I'll be out there for it. You know what I mean? That just dictated anyone who has kind of like maybe a negative look at how this era or this part, like you said, style happened. It was just like, oh my God, you had to be there. The crowds just dictated, the worm itself you couldn't pitch the worm,
And also like, these guys are wrestling, putting their bodies through the equivalent of a car accident every week, every night for 4 nights a week.
Yeah.
Sorry, L. Brent, a metaphorical car accident, but so it's like
sometimes a real one.
Yeah, well, if they can get so what I'm saying is like if they can get away with taking less bumps and getting just as much a reaction, why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't they optimize their bodies for that?
Sure, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Interestingly, the Too Cool team has the visual pinfall here. This leads to a run-in with the Hollies because they don't want Too Cool to get the pinfall. Rikishi comes in to help Too Cool, and Hardcore Holly does a beautiful DDT onto Rikishi, onto the chair. It looked amazing.
Yeah.
And this sets up a match later in the show and the non-finish of this match, which I think warranted here. New Age Outlaws have a big title match on Sunday. They're the champions too, so they can't lose. And Too Cool, you're just building them up now. So if they took the pinfall, they look like Herbs, and we don't need that. We already have one Herb on the show. His name's Test.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay, backstage, Stephanie arrives in a limo. She's not looking vulnerable. She's looking tough, confident. Nothing scared about her this week. She's ready to she has a plan.
Mm-hmm.
And Jim Ross informs us that after 5 weeks, Mick Foley's book is officially #1 on the New York Times bestseller list, even though the stuffy critics refuse to review it, he says.
Mm-hmm.
Mick Foley comes out, big pop. He wants to clear the air with Al Snow and The Rock over what happened last week. And he brings out Al. And a great promo here. This is actually a pretty promo-heavy episode of Raw, which makes sense because the pay-per-views this weekend, you're kind of doing the final pitch.
Sure.
But even as you're doing that final pitch here, you're kind of doing this side angle with Al Snow. The crowd is chanting for The Rock as Al Snow comes out, and Al Snow turns on them. This is a career-making promo, I think, for Al Snow. Like, he does so well here. He tells them to shut up. They're booing him. He says the fans don't care about Foley. And he asks Foley, what do you think the fans will remember you for? It's not your book. And then suddenly they're chanting asshole at Al Snow.
Yep, pretty good.
And he says, all they're going to do is remember you as The Rock's sidekick. They don't care that you're a Japanese deathmatch legend. They don't care about any of this stuff. You're just second fiddle to The Rock. And Foley responds, Snow is a great friend, maybe one of his best. And you know who else is his friend? Joey C from Kid Rock's band, but he's not about to go on tour with Kid Rock. And things are different in the ring, and he likes being in the Rock and Sock connection. He likes being the Rock's friend, he says. And Al Snow says Foley can barely walk. Oh, this is where he says he's a Japanese legend, and he deserves better than to be a clown for these people. Pretty good. Yeah, no, this is a great promo. Foley says he wasn't hurt at all during this team up with The Rock. He's actually, it's the least hurt he's been, and the fans like it. The Rock likes it. He likes it. And when the problem was when Foley and Al Snow teamed, Foley's going to be honest, he thought that they sucked, which the crowd popped for. Al Snow got very upset. And so he challenged Rock and Sock to a tag team match later in the night against himself and a partner of his choosing. And Snow said one last thing, and this was a great reveal. He says, you know how it felt when you thought The Rock burned your book, how you turned your back on The Rock and how you felt so low? That's how I felt when I finished reading your book and all those jokes at my expense, because that's the running gag in Mick Foley's biographies is Al Snow's the punching bag. And he was like, this was such a bad experience. It was worse than watching an Al Snow match. Like it was constantly shitting on Al Snow. Al Snow said because of all of those jokes, it was Al Snow who burned the book and framed The Rock. And he's going to make mankind feel the way he felt after he finished reading his book. Great promo from Snow.
And something I remember too, I think it was at some point I was like, yeah, you should beat someone with a microphone with it on. And he did the
oh, yes.
Which always
you hear the thump.
Yeah. Pretty good.
Yeah. Great setup.
Yeah, it was a good
event.
It was one of those cases, like I said, like sometimes, man, it's deadly when you got two guys in there with microphones going back and forth, so that can be, a lot of times that can be deadly, but this is like, oh, there was something to say. Oh, and he was, you know what I mean? It was like a thing culminating going to the pay-per-view. And then I even loved how that was kept, the book. It wasn't like the first thing, it was like, oh, and by the way, the book. So yeah, the crowd was into it. And that, shut up is a little cheap heat, but not if they're really booing. You know what I mean? Yeah. I've seen guys do that when it's not warranted.
When no one's talking. But the crowd was actually hazing him. It was a warranted shut up.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And this was a great closing of a storyline from like 5 weeks ago that like I'd forgotten about it, and even in the story, you almost forget about it because it's like, oh, Rock and Sock are just back together now, like, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. But like, you actually did pay off that there's a reason here. It's that like The Rock wasn't ever mad at Mick Foley. Like there was never a reason for The Rock to not want to team with him. So it all makes sense.
And there's also something about like the messy weirdness of wrestling of like when things even evolve with people's characters, it makes sense. Like, so if someone would just watch that for the first time, they'd be like, because you actually got to get engrossed in them, like being mad at each other. But someone were to just like be looking over their teenage son's shoulder and like, what does this guy have "help me" written on his forehead backwards? And then the other guy, what is he like? Well, he's kind of like corporate because he has that clothes, but it's this weird like buildup of like, but he's wearing that mask because he's mankind, but he's also, it's got the shitty shirt on. There's so much to explain, but but you kind of look past that and you forget it as they're really like angry and emotional at each other. And then sometimes someone would have to slap you like, my God, that's fucking ridiculous. See, he's get help because he's talking to himself. That's why it's backwards from a mirror. And like what are you watching there? Like there's so much to explain, but it kind of makes it like, it is good. Like a soap opera, like, ooh, what now what's happening? You gotta,
oh yeah.
Not spoon fed.
Yeah, and this rewards the people that do pay attention. I feel like even if like you said, the snooer viewer doesn't understand what's going on with the book.
Snooer viewer, that's fine. A good one. The
snooer viewer.
Yeah. Then little did you know these teenagers would later become Western heritage smart marks.
Stephanie and Vince are backstage. Stephanie says Vince promised her that she could handle it her way. She says, I'm going to handle this my way. And I know at Armageddon, you're going to take care of him. Then she kisses him on the cheek. And honestly, it's a little creepy. There's a little odd sexual tension there that did not make me feel comfortable.
let me look on my creepometer. Wow. It only rated like 170 in terms of wrestling. But I won't disagree.
It's a little creepy.
Yeah.
Hardys come out. They get a good pop. They're getting over. This is great to see. You're seeing their progression week to week. You can even see they have a little bit of confidence right now. Like they feel it. They're not like worried if the crowd is going to accept them. They know the crowd will accept them. That's always great to watch, witness in real time. Speaking about being comfortable, Kurt Angle comes out. Oh my God. It's like he's been in the business for a decade at this point. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's incredible that I know that earnest face, like even a depressed sound, like what, no, it's true.
He talks about the three eyes and he introduces his partner, Steve Blackman. And we learn that actually at the pay-per-view, these two are going to be opponents, Blackman and Angle. And as Steve Blackman comes out, it's our first tease of a tribal tattoo in orange and black. What could it be? It's Taz.
Yeah, that's right.
So how does this work? Does Vince come to you guys and it's like, we signed Taz, figure out how to introduce him?
Well, Taz was a Russo guy. But so in fact, Taz would call me and rightfully so. He's kind of like, oh, fuck, am I going to be buried right out of the gate? You know what I mean? Because, he was a Russo guy and he's, so
is that when you say he was a Russo guy, you mean like Russo pushed for him to be signed in the summer before he left?
Yes.
Right.
And, as we're a lot of people, and also, you know, Vince, like he just liked to keep that, whether like, I'll see,
Yeah.
He wouldn't just be very few people he'd be just immediately glowing about. So, that was like kind of a gimmick that worked greatly in my opinion for Jericho. Like, what's this? You couldn't do the same like countdown thing, but it just was like, oh, that's weird, and also there was that flirtation with at that time, like the smart marks, but it was like, a lot of innuendo and a lot of like just mentions and things and not like big. So, and again, it was just using the Titantron. That was a good thing to be, well, what's that about? And then people would know, and that's all you needed right now. So,
right. And unlike with the Jericho thing, you were like, this could be anything. This could be a wrestler. This could be an event.
Yeah.
Here, I think for the smart marks, it was like, oh, that's Taz's tattoo. Like, it's and the orange and black. Like, it's but it's interesting. Like, to your point, for the smart marks, the ECW audience is such a fraction of the WWF audience that it really is for a small part of your fan base. A lot of people truly don't know what that tribal tattoo was.
It's funny because it's really hard to actually, quantify that. In my, like, if you look at when Jericho came, you saw like he just was introduced, and I can imagine, I don't know the percentages of people who knew who he was or wasn't, but I imagine a lot of this was in the arena. That's Jericho. He's a guy from another. Oh, they're cheering they know who this guy is. Who's this guy? You know what I mean? It kind of like people just immediately came on board by virtue of other people knowing. So that even that small percentage of smart marks that lead it, the regular fans are like, or kids or whoever, like, who's that? Oh, they know, and he's the big deal. Therefore,
that's true.
They're on board.
I've had this exact experience at an arena that you're saying. It's like where there's a teaser and someone's like, what's that? It's like, oh, that's actually Taz. He's a tough wrestler from ECW. He's going to come in.
And so, and even we would talk about like that, because sometimes it'd be like, oh, you don't want to spoon feed it too much, because that's like the fans will come on board because they know like it's totally reasonable that like, how many debuts have there been with like, sure, they would do vignettes or something like, who's this, or whatever. There's always a way to do that. But in my estimation, I think ECW really launched the Attitude Era. You know what I mean? It was super influential in terms of just not only like Russo, whoever, and just, and even how much Vince looked at it, or I don't know, but just the notion that like, whoa, this little weird thing being done out of Paul Heyman's mom's basement in a lot of ways or whatever is really making some noise. And the rest of wrestling, you could say, was getting a little like stale or what have you. So it's like I said, it's hard to quantify like what the percentage of people knew, and I think wrestling sometimes makes the mistakes like, well, they're WCW fans, they're WWF fans. There's a big portion of, I'm sure yourself was like that, like, oh, everyone, they watch everything. You know what I mean? And
especially back then.
Yeah. And the difference sometimes of being like, oh, if they're on at the same time, it can't be recorded, the early TiVo or whatever was here or there. But, is that notion. But there's this notion that's kind of fake that's like, I'm sure some people are like that. I'm straight WWF or like, I don't know. But so they're kind of aware. I don't know. I wouldn't say it was a small portion.
Were you watching ECW at the time or even Nitro? Yeah. Would you keep up with it weekly or when you could?
Yeah, we would kind of like Nitro would usually be on somewhere in the locker room, and there would be in the postmortem a little bit like, what did they do? And it was like always fun to just like, I would just almost tease Vince like, oh God, this horse shit, whether I believed it or not. Oh, the horse shit match with this. What are they doing? And it was so like openly jokey. Like it was like, oh, it was like funny. And I would just like make up shit like, oh, he tripped on the way to the ring and oh, it was terrible. And just, but you'd kind of like, you'd half keep up, In fact, it was more once the ratings were so in WWF at the time in favor, it was more just like, keep up with there. And then like sometimes word would filter. Just like, oh, I heard they're miserable and, the guys and stuff. So there was always like, ooh, it seems like they're going to be, feeding guys until one day, down in the gym at WWF headquarters, like, holy shit, there's Benoit, Guerrero, and Dean Malenko. What are they doing here? So it's like, like, ooh.
Well, actually, there's an interesting WCW piece of news that I think would affect WWF at this moment. In the same Observer, as I was reading this El Brent Pozell thing, the second top story is Vince Russo announcing that Turner has told them that they're going to be reducing Nitro from 3 hours. It used to be on from 8 till 11, and Raw was on from 9 till 11. It's going to be reduced to 2 hours from 8 to 10.
Yes.
That means that Raw, for the first time in many years, will have 1 hour completely unopposed. This is essentially the beginning of the end of WCW, because whoever's left, they're going to flip over and they're going to be like, whoa, wait a minute.
Yeah.
This is way better. Or they're just going to be like, this sucks. This isn't the WCW I used to know. I'm leaving.
Yeah.
Because right now, WCW is kind of presenting a WWF light style, just with a different roster of wrestlers.
Right. No, just that they were a little handcuffed. I mean, say what you will, people have a lot of views of like Russo and what have you, but like, I don't care who you are. It's like if you look at a football team, like here's a new coach, you know, it's like the same, but they always get like, well, he's got to put in his scheme and his system, and you know, it can't just happen like that. It's kind of impossible.
Exactly what Russo said actually in this Observer article about how it's like he actually wanted it 9 to 11 so that they could have the 10 to 11 hour to do more risque stuff. But the executives told him, no, like we want you 8 to 10 and we don't want any risque stuff. Like they're super afraid of these advertisers, the El Brent Pozell stuff. So they're like coming down hard on him to not do any salacious things.
Yeah, and then he was really hired as the master of salacious things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's very, very interesting. Okay, so back to the show. So Kurt Angle's in the ring. Blackman comes in, and Angle said Blackman shows a lot of poise and promise, and if you stick with me, you're going places. I'll take you places with my amazing athletic ability and talents and your... It looks him up and down. Your stuff. we can make a championship caliber team. What do you say? And then Blackman like rolls his eyes and like, let's get on with it. You know, let's do it. Interesting finish here. Again, here I completely as last week I was labeled a clean finish smart mark. And I want to say that
CFSM.
Yes. And as a clean finish smart mark, I was not bothered by this non-clean finish, because I feel both teams, like you kind of paint yourself in a corner. Angle and Blackman have a big match at the pay-per-view. They can't necessarily look weak. Hardy's, they're on the up and up. You don't want them taking a loss, really, or taking a clean loss, let's say.
Right.
And so the way that this happens is that Blackman grabs one of his kendo sticks. He gets on the apron. Terry gets on the apron to protest Blackman getting on the apron. The ref notices Terry. He's distracted. And with the kendo stick, he bashes Jeff Hardy. Kurt Angle gets the roll up and the victory here. And he's celebrating as if he won it all on his own.
Right.
And it makes, I guess you could have done it something where there was some miscommunication between Angle and Blackman, leading to maybe Blackman taking a pin, getting him pissed off and doing the tension with the two of them setting up the match. Then my clean finish smart markness would be quelled, but I was totally okay with this. I want you to know I'm okay with it.
Yeah. And I think it's, it is a pinfall.
Yeah.
Right. Maybe
there
it's not a clean finish, but it's a pinfall, and and the Hardys and the Hardys are still underdogs and still climbing that, so they can always have it that way. And I think just the virtue of one thing that was a gimmick that was being a motif, if you will, that we thought was good, and I thought particularly was great, was like the incredible overselling of a victory by Kurt Angle. That's just juicy. And that's, being like, no, he's got to do that just because, and that's where he would get heat from like real people, because it'd be like, when he won the gold medal legitimately in the Olympics, he's mimicking himself kind of, and people are like, oh, that's, preposterous, but he's just so golden and went with it and just like, yes. And people are booing him and he can't understand why. So that kind of trumps a lot of things. Yeah. It's too fun.
And before the break, we see Stephanie arrive to DX's dressing room. Great hook. After the break, she's in the locker room. You might remember last week on SmackDown when she saw Triple H, she was afraid. She ran off. Here, she's not afraid. She has a mission.
Right.
She's in the locker room and she's asking Triple H to sign the annulment papers. I didn't realize you could still get a marriage annulled a week later. I thought it was 48 hours.
What are you talking about? There's been shenanigans of people annulling marriages after a year and stuff.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Shows how much I know about marriage.
Yeah.
She's asking Triple H.
Thank God that sticking point. I enjoyed the episode, but wait, isn't it an annulment?
What the fuck
isn't that 48 hours? Look, I know wrestling stretches things, but this annulment after 48 hours, that's a little bit beyond the pale. Oh, beyond the mat.
So she asks him to sign the papers. X-Pac is there and he's trolling her. He calls her Mrs. Helmsley and says it kind of intimates that the Outlaws are in the shower, but as soon as they're done, all of them can have sex with her. She's disgusted. And Triple H says, hey, cut it out. That's my wife.
Yep.
And Stephanie appeals as like, please sign this. Like you could be a good person and do this. And both members of DX are like holding back laughter. And Triple H goes, okay, seriously, are we getting in the showers or not? And Steph is pissed that she's about to leave. And he says, hey, hold on. Let me see those papers. I can at least read them. See, I'm a nice guy. Now, why didn't you show me something? Show me some skin. And she leaves. She's like, oh. And then Jim Ross goes, you got to be really low to be lower than Triple H in my eyes. What a miserable human being.
Good old fashioned red-blooded American male reprehensible behavior.
Yeah, just pure misogyny.
Yeah.
Val Venus comes out and it's like, uh-oh, is he going to do one of these dirty things? He says, hello, ladies, only to be cut off by D'Lo Brown's music. A very clever way to avoid that.
Pretty good.
And we learned that the winner of this match will face the British Bulldog for the European Championship based on what happened on SmackDown with Val Venus costing D'Lo a potential shot. And the Run-In Brigade wins again as Bulldog and the Posse run in, attack both guys. It's a no contest. We don't even get a bell, but the match is over and setting up this triple threat.
Sure. And if there's any time to have schmazes and run-ins and whatever, it's before a pay-per-view.
Yeah, absolutely.
You got the, so.
Yeah, and it makes sense. Bulldog probably doesn't want to face either of these guys. So he's just like, I'm going to beat them both up.
Let the run-ins begin.
Then my favorite part of the night, I'm actually going to cut this out and post this on our social medias because it was so funny. Moolah and Mae Young are going to be special guests at the Billboard Music Awards, which I'm assuming were on UPN. So this is just a little cross promotion with UPN and SmackDown. Mae Young is dressed like a homie and she's pouring one out for her homies, she says. And Moolah goes, don't you know your favorite band DMX will be there? DMX is not a band. He's an artist. But all right. And then Mae Young doesn't skip a beat. She says, where my dogs at? And then Moolah goes, oh, Mae, please. You went crazy old cracker.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
It's easy. Glad. It's easy. Just here, say this or misconstrue this. Yeah.
Godfather comes out. There was an angle last night on Sunday Night Heat where Godfather was facing Big Boss Man, and Albert came out to try to get some of the hose, distracting Godfather, leading to him losing his match with Boss Man. That's why we have this match here tonight. And oh my God, this clean finish Smart Mark is so excited because we got a clean finish.
Yeah.
Absolutely definitive. The Godfather wins with a hoe train. Albert, not in any active program, does not need to be protected at all. Takes the loss, eats the pin. Godfather can use a little,
does the honors,
a little win. Yeah, he does the honors because Godfather can use a little boost up.
Sure.
He's been eating some pins lately, so it works.
He doesn't mind.
Yeah. Triple H comes out with some flowers. Ross, ever the professional, resets the show. It's the top of the hour. Lets us know the match is coming up in the next hour. Triple H works the crowd. He says, you've made it pretty clear how you feel about me. What's that word you say about me? Crowd starts chanting asshole. And for the record, just so you know, I feel exactly the same way about each and every one of you. Boo. And this is where the bleeping happened that I mentioned in the Observer thing. He says he's heard what the crowd has said about his wife, calling her a slut or a whore. She's not a slut. She's not a whore. A slut is a woman who goes to Vegas, gets a Mickey thrown in her drink, then drives down Sunset and gets a shotgun wedding. And that's not Stephanie. And I want to point out, this is victim blaming. This is victim shaming. She was a victim here. She is not the whore.
It's shablaming. It's victim shablaming.
Shaming and blaming.
Yeah. What can you do? But it is interesting, like except putting a kindler, gentler show, but not really, and I think because it's one of those things, like you just realize like the hypocrisy of the whole thing of like the advertisers. They're not like, sure, L. Brent Bozell is like, oh, this parent-teacher council, but the advertisers are like, oh God, this pain in the ass is causing a thing and people are watching that. So we got to be political. It's always like a dance. So they're like, fuck, because we want to, advertise in wrestling, not because we like wrestling. Oh, look at the numbers. It's all the numbers. You know what I mean? So they're like, oh, fuck. And if the numbers are going to be lower, we'll see how this settles. Okay. So it's like lip service. Let's do some lip service to cleaning it up. And then, Bozell will calm down or whatever. It's just like, oh, it's politics. It's just like, oh, this is preposterous because those bleepings. And what about the crowd yelling asshole? Well, that's a live thing. We're not in control of that. Oh, so the advertisers can be like, okay, well, that's not, and even L. Brent Bozell could be like, well, they're never going to get into the minutia of like, well, they're actually taunting the audience to say that. Like, oh, what? It just gets murky and like, who cares? So.
Right. That's interesting. Triple H did not say the word asshole. That's true. He got the crowd to just say it.
Right.
And he asked Stephanie to come out so he could sign the papers. He's faking crying. She comes out, and Triple H says that now that she's out here, he's reconsidering. He says, Steph completes him. He can't sign these. Yeah. She calls him a son of a bitch and says that Vince will cripple him at Armageddon. And Triple H says, we're onto something. And then he goes, if your dad, shit, if my dad, and the shit got through. It might have just got through on Peacock, but I was shocked that he said shit. But I'm assuming by accident. He goes,
"Yeah, I'm sure it was accident too. I don't even remember it, or I'm sure it got through." Yeah.
If your dad shit, if my dad can beat me at Armageddon, I'll sign these papers. He goes, but your dad said I can never get another title shot. So if I win, I want to get a title shot. She says she's sure she could have that arranged, and I want to point out that at this point, you kind of make everything make sense here.
Yeah.
This all is just a ruse.
Right.
All of this was just a ruse so Triple H can get a title shot again, which is the thing that he ultimately only cares about. Like, he's like, I'm going to kidnap her. I'm going to force her into this contract. And then the only way I'll get her out of the contract is if I get what I want, which is a title shot.
Well, that's the fun thing about writing wrestling too. And the thing you always have to remember is like, oh, we're going down these blind alleys and building these things and like, Oh, you always got to remember, bring it back to a stipulation, which I always love about it. Like, well, how's she going to get annulled? If like, well, how about a match? It's always like a match will like, then, either solve it or do whatever. So you always have that. You can't deviate too far from that, like bringing it back to the ring for some reason and somehow. And so then it's like, oh yes, if she wants this and this, a match, a stipulation.
So she says she could have it arranged, and he says, of course you can. You have stroke around here. A lot of stroke around here.
Oh, double entendre, boo.
And he says,
L. Brent Bozell, what is he getting at? What does stroke mean? Well, it means influence. Oh, he's up to something. I know.
I think it means something else. He says he doesn't believe Stephanie wants to hear it from Vince himself. Vince comes out and he accepts. He says after this Sunday, Triple H's marriage is going to be over because Vince is going to beat you up from heaven all the way to hell. He notes that this Thursday he'll have new documentation to sign, so he can't weasel out of any of these provisions. So we're having a contract signing on SmackDown.
Yes. Provisions, stipulations. Some of my favorite words.
And then perhaps the most disgusting moment of the show, and one where I feel like kind of negates all this hard work you've been doing, not to curse or anything. He says, I like to seal the deal with a handshake or sometimes a kiss. And then he assaults Stephanie, forces a kiss on her.
Right.
And I have to say, Vince played this so well. Like he leans his torso forward, like he wants to run forward.
Yeah.
But then the force of like everything is holding him back. And you just see him like, shaking. Yeah. Like so good. So good.
It's the moment. And, say what you will. You take your nod from certainly wrong, but how many movies from the 40s, 50s, and 60s, the forced kiss turns into,
absolutely
acquiescing, and everything's made better when later Stephanie might be in on it. And then, retroactively, is it assault? Well, anyways.
Yeah, right. Well, we don't know that yet.
We don't.
After the break, Vince is backstage with Patterson and Briscoe, and Mankind offered him some advice since he knows something about anything goes matches. Rikishi against Hardcore Holly, following up from the angle earlier in the match. Too Cool is on commentary. This is an identical match to the match that Rikishi had with Crash Holly on SmackDown, in that it was 2 moves. It was a belly to belly and bonsai drop, and it's over. Getting over Rikishi is a big, bad monster that you do not mess with.
Right.
He's not selling at all. He hasn't sold, I don't think, one bit yet.
No. He's happy. He just destroys and dances.
Yes.
But the crowd, it's just like the crowd dictates, And beyond that, no one had a problem with him anyway, because just his lineage, background, physicality, everything. So it was like a perfect
he's a veteran.
deal.
He's already been in WWE for a decade.
Yeah.
During this short match, Too Cool was on commentary. Ross calls Brian Christopher Grandmaster Sexy, and he corrects, saying it's Grandmaster Sexy. And after the match, he says, if you're not cool, you're a mofo, and the Hollies are mofos. Now watch this. And they get in the ring and dance. So you're calling people motherfuckers.
I guess.
Well, no, actually you're calling them mofos, to be fair.
Yeah.
But
I don't even because one might argue too, like if you call someone a motherfucker, it's like, oh, he's a good wrestler. Hey, he's a motherfucker.
Yeah, he's a tough guy. Yeah.
I don't know. So it's all murky.
Nurse BB is backstage, getting ready to come out in a beautiful dress. Another tasteful, beautiful dress, by the way. Actually, very tasteful.
Yeah.
Moolah and May, it's an elegant gown, let's say, not even a dress.
Yes.
Moolah and May, another segment promoting their big arrival at the Billboard Music Awards.
Yeah.
Moolah goes to May, what are you doing now? And May goes, I'm living La Vida Loca. And Moolah goes, please don't do that this Wednesday. And May goes, you're wasting my flavor. And then Moolah goes, talk to the hand, girlfriend.
Yeah. Yep. Just march him out. Fine.
Fantastic. I need to find, hopefully there's footage somewhere on YouTube of them at the Billboard Music Awards. I guess you'll probably show it because it's fucking WWE. You're going to show it on the next show.
Also, there's something, it's just a tried and true stupid thing of like, everyone loves either an old person or some kind of out of context nerd acting hip hop. They just lose their minds all the time. I don't know why.
Absolutely. BB comes out. We're reminded her full name is Barbara Bush.
Mm-hmm.
She doesn't even say a word before Ivory interrupts.
I'm surprised Vince didn't change her name later to just Bush.
Ivory interrupts. She looks fantastic. She says, spare the words, Babs. And she starts ripping her a new one, says she can't even wrestle, like makes fun of her fake breasts.
Yeah.
Interestingly, she's like hazing Michael Cole as well, calling him boy toy. This is now weeks of her hazing Michael Cole.
Yeah.
I can only imagine how rough he gets it backstage from her. And she says BB doesn't belong in the ring. Then Jacqueline comes out. She looks incredible in her gown. The Taz graphic interrupts her as well. And she kind of sells it like, what the hell is this? Then Ivory asks, well, who's the fourth contender? There's 3 of us in the ring. Who's the fourth contender in this fatal 4-way evening gown match?
Oh my God. That's where we should have introduced Taz.
All of a sudden, Chyna's music hits. The crowd goes crazy. Is Chyna going to wrestle the women for the first time?
Yeah. Talk about reverse intergender politics. Who would have thought so ahead of its time 25 years ago? Goodness gracious.
Wait a minute. China's going to fight a woman? The women in the ring all act scared. And she says, don't worry. It's not me. I'm busy this Sunday. She's, of course, wrestling Chris Jericho.
Mm-hmm.
And she tells Kitty that Kitty is going to be the fourth competitor. Kitty doesn't want to be. She says she's afraid she's going to get stripped down to her bra and panties, which the crowd pops big for, as does Jerry Lawler, of course. And she continues, China, you don't understand. I don't wear any underwear.
Yeah.
And then Ivory has this priceless reaction of like what?
Good stuff. And this is pure, good old-fashioned pay-per-view selling. Because I can imagine, again, it's impossible to quantify these things. But if anyone was on the fence about the pay-per-view that was like, I don't know, it's a lot of money. And and that like, I'm afraid my clothes are going to be ripped off and I don't wear any clothes. That probably put another 7,000 buys over, I would say, through America. All right, I'm getting it.
Well, and you really do deliver.
Yeah.
Because as we come to learn, this was the infamous pay-per-view where Kitty flashed her hands.
Yeah. There you go.
Backstage, we see Big Show and Viscera already brawling. They have a match later on in the show that's been hyped up. The segment ends with Viscera splashing Big Show through a table. It looked vicious.
Yep. And that's good. A good piece of business because it just makes, you could potentially say like, okay, people could be flat Big Show versus Viscera, but then like, I do a little business before, makes it more dynamic and like, and it makes, just builds up Viscera for the match, which he can get destroyed in later. Makes sense.
Absolutely.
Good piece of business.
Yeah. And the match actually really delivered. I have to say,
actually,
I really enjoyed it. Kane comes out. And then his tag team partner is who other than Test. And it's like, oh yeah, Test. That was my reaction when he came out. And I was just like, wow, how Test is completely forgotten about in this storyline.
Right.
After that moment with Stephanie where he's like, I don't know what to believe anymore. He's completely been removed from this story. He didn't even have any mic time before this or anything to talk about how pissed he is at Triple H. In fact, I feel he was completely neutered in this match. Like, shouldn't he be like? I just kept watching and thinking like he should be more angry at Triple H. Like this match should start with him running into the aisle and beating up Triple H. Like he should be apoplectic. This man ruined his marriage. He ruined his future.
Yeah, well, one could argue that he's like just so confused and hurt, but I don't disagree. And also, like at a certain point, it really came down to like he was new. Yeah, and I'm not making excuses, but it's kind of like at a certain point, like there's just not enough real estate.
And also, I feel like this is where politics works against him. He could have stood up for him. He could have he needed to stand up for his character,
right? And
be like for example, with this finish, traditional wrestling booking would say that Test needs to get some heat back right now. As we've discussed, he looked like a herb last week. Right. At the same time, though, Triple H has the main event at the pay-per-view, so he can't necessarily eat a pin right now. Right. He has to look strong. So you could have done something with like a visual pinfall or some semblance of like Test can actually get the better of Triple H. I guess you sort of did that last week on Raw when they faced each other. But I think he needed it again here, and you don't even get that. Instead, I guess you do get the low blow, but Triple H wins with the pedigree.
Right.
And I think also this is where Triple H's politicking comes into play, where it's like he's burying this potential person who could take a spot.
Yeah, and I don't have a problem with anything moving forward other than it. I think the biggest thing you have a problem with is the fizzling out. You know what I mean? Because you can have someone lose and be fucked up and whatever, no matter what. And as long as they're going to maybe come back later or just, give a reason. It's just that kind of like, okay, and just move that because there's just too many moving parts and not enough, real estate. And that's kind of what happened, frankly.
Yeah. No, makes sense. We get a little tease backstage where we see that Al Snow has in fact found his partner. He's talking to the partner. The partner is off camera. And says, tonight we'll finally get rid of the rock and sock connection.
Ooh.
Big Show's coming out. He looks very serious, very angry. I like this. I like this look on the Big Show. Throws his belt to the ref. Like, get out of here, Viscera. Let's fight. The first spot of the match, Viscera chucks Big Show up and dumps him into a huge Samoan drop. Crazy. Like, they're doing huge spots here. Side suplex. Like, they're doing so much, but the crowd not responding at all. This is the quietest the crowd has been all night. Jim Ross notes, half a ton is in this ring.
Yeah.
Since they're both 500
But it's
pounds.
true. I liked the match because there's something about
I really liked it.
Big Show doing those maneuvers with someone else that's huge.
Yeah.
It's just it goes to show you, like, sometimes it's just such a disadvantage to be that big and work with, you know what I mean, just smaller people in terms of, like, well, wouldn't that destroy him, or you know what I mean? But somehow when you got someone huge, just the regular moves are like, oh, that's just impactful. I don't know, something great about it.
At one point, Big Show goes to the top rope, delivers a drop kick from the top rope. It's not pretty, but it's effective.
Yeah.
and it's the 3 count, and it's over.
Yeah.
After the match, Big Boss Man is on the screen.
Mm-hmm.
And one last knife into the Big Show before the pay-per-view. The camera is positioned in a window. We're in the house of the Big Show's mother, in the kitchen, and the camera is outside of the house, peeping in. It's like a little voyeuristic view.
Mm-hmm.
And Big Show's mother is crying. Boss Man said that he uses police resources and found something huge from the Big Show's family's past. And he says if the Big Show's mom doesn't tell the Big Show, the Boss Man will do it himself. The mom is crying and pleading and says it should come from her, that she never wanted this to get out. And Boss Man goes, never wanted what to get out? And then she goes, that he's illegitimate. And Boss Man viciously goes, so you're saying he's a bastard?
Yep. He was great.
Look, and he goes like, look at that red light in the window. That's a camera. You just told your son and everybody out there watching Monday Night Raw that Big Show is a bastard.
Yep. What kind of person?
Cool.
Yeah. And I tell you what, this was very interesting for me, reliving this, because I was on pins and needles a little bit, so we kind of went out like, okay, here's the deal. We're going to, the thing was set up. We're going to go get this woman and do it. And also we talked before about like the motivated camera. So part of it was going to be like, oh, this is just a vignette, like a movie with the cameras like there. What reason? And very few times do you actually like talk about the camera, because that's the bizarre thing we've talked about before. Like, oh, the fourth wall is gone and the announcers can see something, but why wouldn't the wrestlers, reveal something, or all this kind of shit. So this one, how it worked was like, okay, we got this woman's address, someone from Worcester, and we're going over there, right? So like, okay, so I'm with Big Show camera crew, I'm in charge, and like, so where did we get this woman? Who is she? And then I said we met her son, who was like a guy in his 30s, like a super mark, and and in this real house somewhere where this woman lived, and like, is she an actor in Worcester? Did they find an actor in Worcester? So I'm just kind of like, I don't know. The pace is so relentless. There's not like, let's look at some casting. Send me that tape of that woman. Or like, I was like, I don't even know who the fuck this woman is. I don't know. I don't even, to this day, I don't know. So we go and we start setting it up like, okay, maybe we'll have the camera inside and Big Show Boss Man will knock on the door. Hey, how are you? Well, hi, I'm a friend of your son's, all this kind of shit. And which was also fun because it's up to you. So kind of what you do is you bring back to the truck, and I'm always like, whoa, that might be too long. Fuck, that's kind of working. But like, I don't know. This woman's kind of like, I want her crying. It's not the greatest actor. Ooh, this is coming off kind of funky. And I'm like, oh, fuck, I'm going to bring something back to the truck. And you do it during the day, and then you bring it to the truck and it's going out fucking live. So it's like, what was that piece of shit? If it looks flat and people are like, oh, that looks fucked up, you're like, oh God, fucking pressure. So came up with a thing like, let's put the fucking camera outside, hides that woman, even though it's dark. And then just said like, just sob and cry. That fucking worked so good. When the camera was in with the full light in the kitchen and she's like, oh, I was like, ooh, this don't look good. You know what I mean? Even though it's wrestling and even though whatever, it's like, that don't look good. Took that camera out there. And then that was weird. Like, why is the camera out? And then I'm like, oh, that would make sense. That boss man is like, I'm setting her up. And then he's just so fucking golden. That's what people don't realize. Like, he's like, yeah, I'll be friendly at first, knocking the door. Okay, how about this? Yeah, I'll do that. So seasoned, will do anything. And every time was like, great. And then just said like, okay, let's do that. And then start to torture. And then you just sob. It doesn't matter. We don't have to like, and they did that great thing where he repeats it. If like, he's a legitimate, it's like, we don't understand what she's saying. Doesn't matter. What did you say? And it just like was fast. And it's like, okay, it wasn't exactly what we went out to say to do. We're going to shoot through the window, or that was up to me. So I'm still, you never know, on the way back, like, fuck, I like this. I hope everyone else likes it. And it worked, but it just goes to show you like, fuck, you're always on pins and needles, no matter what. You're going out to just do this task out some Worcester somewhere, driving around in the fucking dark, in some house with just a camera crew. Like, and now we're racing back to the thing and to take the tape to the truck, and we'll see how, you know what I mean? But that live is great. Like, fuck it. There's nothing else to do. There's no second guessing. That's it. And I was quite pleased with it, though. I think it came out great. And I
started the segment thinking like, oh, not again.
Right.
Like, leave Big Show alone already. But by the end, I was like, oh, wow, this is like the way Boss Man sold it, I thought.
And what I wanted to say, too, and 80% was because of him. And then even at the end, we're like, what kind of a person are you? Like, just like, you really,
I love that.
You start to be like, oh, he's so fucking good. He's a fucking bizarre sadist. Who's like really like, has this weird sense of like, I'm a lawman and I'm fucking doing this and I'm torturing this guy. And, not a thing other than just like, oh, he enjoys it. And Ray, rest in peace. What a funny fucking great guy who like could work any style, work with anyone and like, whatever, man. And love this and love being on. And there's, he's been all over WCW, wherever, and he's someone that can just plug him in with anyone. He knows what works. Yeah. He's
sad he's not around.
He's underrated. He was great.
Quick backstage shot of Big Show after a commercial, crying on his cell phone, asking his mom why she never told him. Mm-hmm. Why lie? You really do end up feeling very bad for Big Show. Yeah. Even though there's some like snot
what
coming
now?
out.
Yeah, sure.
Look nasty. Nasty.
I think, and I'm not sure if I remember this, it may have been because he was saying like, how do I cry on camera? I've heard you can pull a nose hair or something. And I think I made a suggestion, and I don't know if he did it or not at some point. Like, why don't you get a bunch of like wasabi or something and like put, like the wasabi paste or something, like put it in there, and then you can really be like, oh, it'll make your eyes water. And but that's I don't know if he did it or not, but I just remember saying that's something you could do.
Then we have our main event. We have Mick Foley coming out, gets a great pop. Then The Rock comes out, and that's a pop.
Yeah.
That's a pop.
Yeah.
Huge pop. Al Snow comes out, gets down there, and the announcers are asking, where's his partner? All of a sudden, he extends his arms like he's Jesus. And then Y2J's music hit. And this was great because even I was like, oh, who's left? Who can they put? Like, you didn't hard sell it like it could be somebody new.
Right.
So you knew it had to be somebody that's already on the roster.
Right.
And I didn't spend the time to really think about like who hasn't been on the show yet, but I had no idea who it would be. And it was a pleasant surprise where it's like, oh, Jericho.
Yeah.
And it makes sense because Jericho and Mankind had that match on SmackDown. So it could sort of continues this like side feud that you like a mini thing that you set up for a week.
And then also it was one of those things where like, oh, that's weird. That's interesting. They had that vibe too. Like, oh, yeah, somehow it didn't feel just like, oh, because he was so up and coming and those like, oh, and we're kind of putting those Rock and Jericho, but not really. And, all that.
Yeah, it was a good payoff, I would say. And Jericho gets a little mic time. Getting a little burpy.
Getting a little choked up there about Jericho's mic time.
Yeah.
Jericho. Get some mic time.
It was beautiful.
Yeah.
So he mocked Foley about having the best-selling book in the country. He notes how that's nothing and that Jericho has sold 1 million records. And he pulls out WWE The Music Volume 4 and says the only reason it's sold is because his track is the opening track. And he's going on, and finally China comes from behind him and gives him a big clothesline, which the crowd loved. Like, finally, shut up.
Yeah.
And then it turns into a melee.
Why not?
They're fighting on the outside. At one point, Jericho and Snow attempt a double drop kick from the top rope. It's a little mistimed. And Lawler goes, Al Snow was a second or two late, just like in life.
Ooh.
Brutal. Big hot tag to The Rock. Crowd goes apoplectic, like just absolutely nuts for his hot tag. And he does so well with the hot tag, doing the punches and, the spitting on the hand for the final punch. Jim Ross losing his mind on commentary, like just at his peak. And eventually Foley gets Mr. Sacco out, and he has Snow and Mr. Sacco. It's almost the end of the match. Rock and Jericho are wrestling outside, and the Outlaws come out and attack The Rock. Jericho helps them attack The Rock, and so the Outlaws come in the ring and attack Foley. And then Al Snow helps them attack Foley. And there's no finish. The Rock and Sock eventually get the better of the Outlaws, but Al Snow runs in and smacks Mick Foley with head. He gives Mick Foley head. Al Snow gives Mick Foley head. By God.
Yeah.
And as the show closes.
With that devastating styrofoam.
Well, it's plastic, probably.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. He yells, "I'm your real friend," as the credits roll. And Jim Ross reminds everyone Armageddon is this Sunday and quickly runs down the card. Great episode. Great piece of business.
Yep. Even with the satisfying ending for the no finish smart marks.
Yes. This, I feel like you said, like for a pay-per-view go-home show, a main event can end in a non-finish. This makes sense.
Absolutely, yeah.
And
this is madness.
So much going on.
How is all this going to make sense? You better get the pay-per-view. Yeah, that's good old-fashioned.
And it's interesting, like you wrapped up the build for the main event at the top of the hour. So you allowed the semi-main to get the final quarter to get their proper build-up. Because I feel like the Rock and Sock against Outlaws, that's like the second from the top.
Right.
In terms of star power and build-up, which unfortunately means the world title is third from the top. But we'll get to that.
Who cares? All that whole business is changing at this era as far as like mid-card, you know what I mean? Like none of that really like matters.
Yeah, also like the title, it kind of is, the titles in general kind of become more props than, the world title.
I think, well, I would...
Or storytelling device.
I don't disagree.
I
don't disagree with you, but at the same time, I would just think that like other matters just override it. Like in sports, you might have a story that's like, why are they not talking about the winner of the game? The controversy of this quarterback or whatever. Sometimes controversy will override that, and then you can hopefully get back to that the title. You don't want to like just be like it's shitty or it's a prop, but it's just like hopefully this wedding and all this business is just too controversial to put in a backseat. I would say, but good build up to the pay-per-view. I remember being very young and back in the day watching wrestling, when wrestling used to be just the local wrestling was just a kind of a commercial to get people to go to the arenas days before pay-per-views. So you kind of be like, there's all squash matches and stuff. And they just like kind of leak some stuff in that I was saying like, oh, fans, you got to come down to Detroit's Cobo Arena to see, this. And I remember one match was someone saying like, how is this going to be resolved? Like, it's going to be this stipulation match. You're going to have to go see it live. And then, I didn't see it live, but then remember the next week, someone, I can't remember, Pompero Firpo or someone's mouthpiece came out and said like, it was like, that match that was supposed to settle everything live at the Cobo Arena. Well, it settled nothing. You're just like, oh. And then I started to realize, oh, really? It just never ends. It's just like, you gotta go see it. If you want to see satisfying things, you gotta get that pay-per-view or go live. Oh, you know what? Fuck, you gotta go to the next one.
They didn't resolve it. It's they got unfinished business.
Yeah. Turns out the thing that was gonna settle everything just made more problems.
Yeah, made it worse.
Yeah. I love it.
Well, We have one more show before the pay-per-view. I'm pretty hyped for this pay-per-view.
Yeah.
I'm
retroactively hyped for this pay-per-view.
Yeah. I remember it was a fun one. It's the last pay-per-view of the year. We also have the SmackDown. Hopefully we'll see more of Moolah and Mae Young.
Yeah.
Hopefully we'll see more of you on our next episode. As always, we love your feedback. TFTattitudeera@gmail.com. Let us know. Send us some questions. We're going to probably do our Q&A episode after Armageddon. After we wrap up this pay-per-view cycle. So
send us anything, negative or positive.
Yes, please. TFTattitudeera@gmail.com. And our socials are also TFTattitudeera. And we'll see you next Monday on Tales from the Attitude Era.